Okay, this is a re-recording. I had a little bit of a computer glitch, so if you see any discrepancies in the drawing or the video, that's why, so I'm just re-recording. We were working on this top area up here, so I'm going to keep going and working on that area. Got my paper towel here to protect what I'm doing. So basically, looking at this primary reference, we're going to be doing this upper part a little bit darker than it is in the photo, just for some extra contrast and drama. So kind of in this 1-2 range, kind of creating a gradation. So we started with our buffer zone earlier. I'm using maybe a 4B, could be a little bit lighter, a little bit darker, but in that area. So just continuing to first create your buffer zone. So working across this area here, making sure probably previously you had done this with your ruler, and so just making sure that this really lines up with the other side. So the table here is pretty light because the light is hitting it, so this nice dark value is going to create lots of contrast. Really, really small marks, just 1/8 of an inch as we move across that. And keep in mind here, we don't want this to appear as a line later on, so it can help to kind of create this as an uneven edge. So I might create this little series of gradations here, just getting a little bit lighter. So I'll do a little bit of this off camera because I'm just continuing what you guys already know, what we've been doing. Okay, I've slowly worked my way across here with the pencil in a 4B, or maybe a little bit darker or lighter depending. If I have any areas here where it's a little bit uneven, I can go in on this side with my eraser to clean that up. So just little tiny things here that I can fix as I go. I'm going to also make sure that I'm creating this nice clean edge here. So we already did this edge with the buffer zone, but just making sure it's really crisp, and then switching directions. So primarily this area I'm going to go in a horizontal mark. So I'm just connecting these horizontal marks to that buffer zone area. So going back and forth and making sure that where I'm changing the direction of the mark, I'm just overlapping those so that you don't really see that change and it just all feels gradual and like one piece. And I'm just making sure that this is wide enough now that when I go in using my graphite stick, that we don't see, you know, any weird gaps. So using my graphite stick, I've got a 2B. All right, so I'm just shading a little bit over the areas that I already have. So that's why I need to have that buffer zone there, because it would be hard to get that really clean edge with just the graphite stick. So I might change directions a little bit as I need to. But again, primarily I'm going to be going horizontal side to side. And this is going to be a pretty dark area, so you're going to be pressing down a little bit with some pressure and we'll go over this area probably several times as well to get this as dark as we want it to be. Okay, so I've kind of filled in this area a little bit. Now, again, I'm going to work to make sure that they really connect and I don't see any weird outlining here or just kind of sudden jumps. So I'm going back in and I'm going over some of this area with the pencil. So again, going side to side. And this is also then letting me get a little bit darker. So I'm especially concentrating in this kind of in-between area. Also look here and see, okay, do I have sort of like a darker outline kind of thing happening from when I did my buffer zone, maybe right along the edge. So if any of that's happening, then you're just filling in the gaps. So it's all really, really gradual. I'm still going with really small marks, aiming for about 1/8 of an inch. So just really focusing in these areas where we need to make sure that those two materials are transitioning smoothly. So while I'm at it, this side is maybe a little bit lighter, at least in mine right now, so I can come back over here and make sure that this is as dark as I want it. Notice I've got my protecting paper towel underneath my hand. So at this point we've got a pretty good amount of shading on here. So you really need to make sure that you're using that paper towel. If you don't, you're essentially just going to be undoing all of the work that you're doing. So remember that rubric, one of the points is having these crisp outlines. You also need these gradations of value. You need a full range of value. If you're smudging your work as you go, it's going to all end up with blurred edges and kind of like going toward one medium dark gray. So the opposite of what we want with that full range of value and the contrast. That's another thing on the rubric. All right, so again, just making sure that all of these transitions are occurring smoothly and making things a little bit darker. So again, using that full range of value. Our photograph has a lot of light areas, so we're kind of exaggerating some of these dark areas for dramatic effect, as you do in all kinds of art. So I like to compare it to movies or television. If we were to just watch someone's life, it would be pretty boring, pretty slow. So in a drama, like say a hospital drama, like Grey's Anatomy, it has all of these situations that might occur in real life, but they're all happening at once. So it just creates this really engaging, high drama, fast-paced kind of thing. So that's what we're doing in our drawing as well. You know, in here, yes, there's a transition, yes, there's some different values, but not as dramatic as the artist's rendering. So in our rendering, we're going to make it even more dramatic to make it appear even more 3D volumetric. All right, so one of the areas we haven't touched yet is this shadow down here. So in our photo, we've got a pretty light cast shadow. So even though we've got our reflected light on the edge, again, pretty subtle, but it is there, then it actually gets a bit darker down here, and we want to create contrast. So I'm going to let this shadow be really light. So because of that, I'm going to start with my HB pencil. And so I was just cleaning up some edges down there. But now I'm actually going to use my eraser a little more. I'm actually going to start by erasing these edges of the shadow. So we want to know where they are, and I can still see them, but just barely, and you can't see them in the video probably. So that way we don't see lines in our shadow. The edge of a shadow is not going to have a clear line. It's going to be that soft edge that we talked about. So that's what we want. Where we do have a crisp edge, though, is right here at the cylinder, right? Because the cylinder is an actual form, as opposed to the shadow is just an effect of light on the table. So there we can start right at that edge, and I'm following that rounded edge, but eventually I'm going to just go side to side horizontal. I had a question in class about whether if your tabletop, if you've made it at an angle because you're making it at a more dramatic angle, whether you still go horizontal, and the answer is yes, because the tabletop is flat, and so that is, no matter what perspective you're seeing, we want to go with that kind of flat direction to create that illusion in the picture. So it really helps give this thing the illusion that it's sitting on something flat. All right, so again, creating that buffer zone. The shadow starts a little bit of ways up the side here, so I can change directions there. And then once I've created that buffer zone, oops, a little too dark here, sorry, I'm just basically drawing with my eraser, kind of tapping a little bit, almost like I am hatching or stippling with that to fix that. All right, then once I've created that buffer zone, now I'm going side to side. And as I go side to side, I'm going to then go up to that line, but in the line that I erased, so it's sort of a line that just you can see or you remember where it is. And you might want to go a little bit over it. You're going to make it a little bit of an uneven edge. So we do want this to be a soft edge, so you can help that with how you shade it. All right, so same thing down here, going side to side, horizontal, up to that edge, and letting that be a really soft edge. The other thing that you can do as you're shading a light area like this, this is a great place to use a blending tool that maybe is already dirty. You might want to try it out a little bit before you use it. See how dark it is. So I got my little bit of scrap paper. And if you don't have a dirty blending tool, or if it's too dark, or I'm sorry, too light, you can actually make it darker by shading with a darker tool, graphite sticker pencil, and then just rubbing it against there. And then I can actually shade using my blending tool. And again, this will help with that soft edge. And I can also, so here I'm actually purposely crossing this edge that I shaded. Everywhere else, if I'm going to blend at an edge, I'm going to make sure that I'm only on one side of an edge. So let's say I want to blend up here, which isn't a bad idea. Notice how I'm staying just on the right side. I would never cross that edge with my blending tool. Nope. I would never cross this edge with my blending tool. I would shade just below it, and I would blend just below it, or in this case, just to the right of it. And that's how you maintain those crisp edges that we want. And again, that also gives me a little bit to work with here to shade with. So, and again, I'm shading side to side. One thing that I'm noticing right here, I've got sort of a little bit of a curving effect. I don't want that. So since that's really close to my cylinder, I'm just going to fix that up, make sure that this edge does feel like it is straight. So these would be parallel lines, even though they're blurred lines, because the cylinder would be parallel. Sometimes with different light things happening, you might see some funky things, but you would not see it getting wider, you wouldn't see it curve, because this is reflecting these sides of the cylinder. Or I should say it's not reflecting, that's an actual thing. I meant it figuratively, but it is cast by that part of the cylinder. So this shadow might get lighter as I go, but it is going to extend to the very edge of my page, just as you can see here. So if I need to, I could get this dirty again. Again, I'm only blending. On one side, not crossing that line. Turn my page in part so you can see that better. Notice how small this blending tool is. I've folded this using a really small scrap of paper towel. It's really important in order to be able to get that precision. Test that out, make sure it didn't get too dark. So lots of different ways I could choose to shade this, but that works pretty well. And then I also want to make sure this is equally smooth right in here. So I can use the very tip of my blending tool so that I don't accidentally blur the edge of the cylinder. And I'm just getting right up to that edge without crossing it. Here it got just a little bit darker than I wanted it to because the point of this was a little bit more dirtier, I guess. So again, I don't erase it fully, I'm just using my eraser as a drawing tool, and I can stipple or hatch with it a little bit to make that a little bit lighter without just kind of having a big white spot. I'm just kind of creating that smoothly progressing gradation, that's how I can say it. I'm using a clean blending tool now if I want to just blend without adding any darker values to that. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. I think this is going to match up with that next video. Before I go on to the next video, the one good thing about having this glitch and having to re-record, I can do things a little bit differently, learn from things that I wish I had done differently. So one thing I'm doing a little bit differently is I actually lightly marked off where I want these transitions to be from this number 4, so pretty light gray, then transitioning into the darkest 1 or 2 here, and then getting a little bit lighter, and then we'll just fade out. So I actually really lightly marked them you want to be careful with that because you don't want to have lines appearing there. So I really lightly marked top and bottom, or even a whole line, but it's so light. And again, I'm going to erase that as I go, but that's helping me kind of keep track of where I want these different values to go as I progress and keep them even. All right. Okay, before I transition to the next video, I just was sneaking a peek, making sure that this is going to be pretty much picking up where the next one does, and I noticed in that my shadow came up a little higher, which is actually accurate. So I'm going to just kind of say, okay, actually my line needs to be up a little bit higher, no big deal. I'll just continue starting again with that buffer zone to keep that edge crisp. And I can even make this side of it a little bit darker, so shading onto the cylinder, again keeping that side nice and crisp. Connecting my shading so that it's creating a smooth transition up into the lighter shading as well as over into this dark area. All right. Making sure that I transition here into my shadow. And again, then switching side to side. So the same thing we did down here. Just noticing that, okay, my shadow is actually a little bit bigger than I had drawn it in this copy for whatever reason. So, and then once I have my little buffer zone, and I can switch directions. And if I end up with any kind of line here that I don't want, I could just fix that up again just by using my blending tool, my eraser, kind of very lightly tapping as if I'm stippling or hatching, but in reverse. And there you go. So I think you guys can figure that out from there. All right, we'll now transition into the next video.